Hello and welcome back to the Lost Planeswalker, and today we are going to talk about a new commander from the Wilds of Eldriane, Eriette of the Charmed Apple. This is a super unique Orzhov commander that we have not seen anything like in a while, and I really wanted to build a deck around it. So, Eriette of the Charmed Apple is 1 white-black, legendary creature, human, warlock. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of auras you control. This is a super cool card, basically making it so we enchant our opponent's stuff and then they can't do anything to us. This is a really unique mechanic that I don't really think we've seen a lot of recently, and I really like this idea. First off, look at the lands. I have Godless Shrine, 21 plains, and 12 swamps. You can really throw any number of lands in this deck. Nothing is too very much mana pip dependent, so you really don't need as many good lands, let's say, that, are able to tap for both. You could keep this pretty basic. Next up, let's look at protection, because this is the next category I really want to go over, because our commander, we want to keep it on the battlefield, obviously. Without it, we basically buffed up all of our opponent's stuff, and then they're just going to swing right back into us with it. So I have General Enforcer, Lightning Greaves, Mithril Coat, and Sphere of Safety. General's Enforcer makes it so our commander is indestructible, which is super sick for just 2 mana. Lightning Greaves gives it Shroud, so it can't be targeted, and Mithril Coat also can come straight onto the battlefield from your hand at flash speed and save it. But probably the coolest and most powerful card in this deck is an enchantment, Sphere of Safety. Now, if you've never played Sphere of Safety, it has a couple interesting requirements. It sort of works similarly to Ghostly Prison or Propaganda, but the mana value you have to pay for attacking creatures is dependent on the number of enchantments you control. This is super great, obviously, in an enchantment heavy deck, because they're going to have to pay a lot of mana, including all of the enchantments on their own creatures. So if they want to reduce that number to swing into you, that means they have to sacrifice or kill their own stuff, which is a really cool idea, and is going to make it really hard for them to swing into you. Now, moving into cost reduction, we obviously want to cast a lot of these enchantment spells, but we don't want to pay full price because we can't do as much then. So we have Danitha, Carpathian Paragon, Hero of Ironis, and Killian, Ink Duelist. All of these reduce the cost of our spells, including some other cool benefits. Starfield Mystic, Starheim Courser, and Transcendent Envoy are also some more to help reduce the cost of our aura spells. If you can get 1 or 2 of these onto the battlefield, you can really just cast as many of these a turn as you can get, which is going to move into our next category where we talk about Enchantment Matters cards. These cards care about you casting enchantments, having enchantments, doing all sorts of things to get them or whatever. So first off, we have Ajani's Chosen, Archon of Sun's Grace, and Arden Intrepid Archaeologist. Ajani's Chosen makes these little cat creature tokens that we can choose to attach the auras to, even though I don't think we're going to. Archon of Sun's Grace gives Pegasus' lifelink and makes Pegasus, which is super great, gives us some blockers, just like Johnny's Chosen. And Ardent Intrepid Archaeologist lets us move those auras. This is a pretty cool idea, because at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may attach any number of auras you control to a target permanent or player. Meaning, if one of our opponents put out a big new threat, well, we'll just throw one of our enchantments on it, and that way it can't attack us. Next is Daxos the Returned, Grim Guardian, and Hateful Eidolon. Daxos the Returned makes these experience counters whenever we cast an enchantment, and then makes spirits based on the number of experience counters we have. Grim Guardian slowly drains all of our opponents for life whenever we cast an enchantment, which is a super cool ability. Hateful Eidolon has lifelink, and whenever an enchantment creature dies, draw a card for each aura you control that was attached to it. This includes our opponent's stuff. This is kind of actually better for us, because on our opponent's turns, when they're swinging into our other opponents and that creature dies that we had an enchantment on, we draw the card, and then we don't have to discard it at our end step because it's not our turn yet. So this can be able to fill up our hand for our next turn and be able to have the best plays available. Next up is Core Spirit Dancer, Mesa Enchantress, and Ondu Spirit Dancer. Core Spirit Dancer is really great if we want to start attaching those auras to ourselves. This thing gets buffed the more attached to it, and whenever we cast one, we can draw a card, which is super great. Mesa Enchantress does the same thing. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we can draw a card, letting us refill our hands over and over. And Ondu Spirit Dancer has a really unique ability from the Commander Masters decks that if you play Enchantress, you need to pick up this card, because whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under control, you may create a token that's a copy of it. Do this once each turn. This is incredibly powerful, and I really love this card. Doubling up your enchantments, whether it's an aura or something to stay on the board, this is going to be incredible. You want to cast Smothering Tithe? How about 2 of them? And this works especially well if you start pairing it with token doubling cards, because if you can play this, it makes a token of that. Then whenever you cast your next thing, you get multiple tokens because they're all doubling, and it's just incredibly strong. And lastly, we have Spellbook Vendor and Scram Senior Edificer. Spellbook Vendor is one of the new cards from Wilds of Eldriane, and it has has a really cool ability that is awesome with our deck. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 1. When you do, create a sorcerer role token, attach it to a target creature you control. Now we have to attach this to a creature we control, but that's making an aura, which is just awesome. We have lots of cards that care about us making them or attaching them, so I am super excited to see them. In Scram, good old Scram, whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. We're going to be casting a ton of auras, so I'm super excited to see this in the deck. And now, a category I call an enchantment for you, an enchantment for me, is basically all the aura enchantments and some other enchantments in this deck that are really going to help us get this strategy going and keep our opponents from swinging into us. Starting off, we have All That Glitters, Angelic Gift, and Ethereal Armor. All That Glitters and Ethereal Armor give +1/+1 for each enchantment you control, and Angelic Gift gives a creature flying and lets us draw a card. So that's pretty sick. If our opponent has a big threat, we can just give it huge evasion, and that way, when it attacks our opponents, they can't hit us with it. Glistening Oil, Lord Skitter's Blessing, and Martial Impetus are next. Glistening Oil is a little mean because it gives a creature infect, especially if we put it on one of our opponent's creatures that has like trample or something. That could basically one-shot them if it's big enough. In addition to that, this is one of those really cool auras that when it goes into the graveyard, it returns to our hand, so we can cast it again and again. Lord Skitter's Blessing makes a Wicked Roll token that we attach to a creature, and it has a really cool ability. At the beginning of your draw step, if you control an enchanted creature, you lose a life and draw an additional card. This works similarly to Phyrexian Arena, which we'll see here later, spoilers, but it's incredibly strong. I really love this card, and for 2 mana, I'm definitely going to be putting this on a lot of my decks. And Martial Impetus has enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and is goated. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, each other creature that's attacking one of your opponents gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is especially good in our deck because that can't attack us. I guess unless we're the last one in the game with that goated effect, but it only buffs those creatures that are attacking our opponents, which is super strong. Nurgle's Rot, Parasitic Impetus, and Phyresis is next. Nurgle's Rot is a cool card from Warhammer 40k that has the same effect where we enchant a creature an opponent controls. This one is specifically an opponent control. And when it dies, we make a little 1/3 and then we get it back to cast again. Parasitic Impetus also goads a creature, gives it +2/+2, but when that creature attacks, its controller loses 2 and we gain 2, which is a really cool effect. And Phyresis is another card that gives something infect. Now this one doesn't return to our hand, but 2 cards in this deck that give infect probably enough. Phyrexian Arena, Sage's Reverie, and Shielded by Faith are our next 3 cards, with Phyrexian Arena being a commander all-star. At the beginning of combat, we lose life and draw a card. Yeah, everybody loves to draw more cards. If you gotta pay 1 life to do it, that is perfectly fine with me. Sage's Reverie has, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each aura you control that's attached to a creature, which by the time we play this card is probably gonna be a lot. And then it gives enchanted creature +1/+1 for each aura you control that's attached to a creature. So this is just another great giant buff spell and really cool. And Shielded by Faith gives a creature indestructible, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield, we can attach it to another creature. So if our opponent plays a big threat out of nowhere, maybe at flash speed, guess what? We can still attach it to that creature, which is super great. Talking about attaching things at flash speed, we have Sigarda's Aid, Sigil of the Empty Throne, and Smothering Tithe. Sigarda's Aid is probably one of the coolest cards in this deck, and it is going to be awesome because we can hold up our auras on our turn, and whenever our opponent goes to do something before attackers or whatever, we can basically cast those enchantments to put them on their creatures so they can't attack us. Sigil of the Empty Throne gives us 4/4 angels whenever we cast an enchantment spell, which is awesome. And Smothering Tithe, whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If that player doesn't, we create treasure. Our opponents are probably going to want to pay the 2 in this deck because if not, they're going to have less creatures to swing at us with because we're going to be able to cast more spells. And lastly, we have Spirit Mantle, Trespasser's Curse, and Unquestionable Authority. Spirit Mantle gives enchanted creature +1/+1 protection from creatures. If our opponent has a really big, maybe deadly creature, maybe something we already put infect on, this gives protection from creatures, so there's basically no way they can block it. Trespasser's Curse enchants a player actually, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an enchanted player's control, that player loses 1 and you gain 1. This is going to be super powerful in any deck that's playing a lot of tokens. I didn't realize this card was a thing, and for it being a common for only 2 mana, that is incredibly strong, and I'm going to pick up a copy of this just to throw in my other decks. And Unquestionable Authority is our last aura enchantment with enchant creature. When Unquestionable Authority enters battlefield, we draw a card, and enchanted creature also has protection from creature. Pretty good list of enchantments, and we'll see some more as we go through the rest of the sections, but next up we have Recursion. I really want to focus on Recursion in this deck because we are going to equip our opponent's stuff with these enchantment auras, and they're going to kill those creatures, so all of our good stuff is going to go to the bin instead of on our creatures that we want, so we want a way to get them back, right? So first off, we have Angelic Destiny, Crystal Chimes, and Ghoulish Impetus. Angelic Destiny is a really cool card that I really love because enchanted creature gets +4/+4, has flying and first strike, and is an angel, which is pretty great. Gives some of the stuff we're going to give our opponents evasion, first strike, so it won't die, but if it does die, it comes back to our hand, which I really like. Crystal Chimes, we sacrifice it and we return all enchantment cards from our graveyard to our hand. This is awesome, honestly. If it's late in the game and we're kind of like, I don't really have anything to do, we can Crystal Chimes to get everything back and basically refill our whole hand and make it so our opponents can't swing into us again. Whether it was after a board wipe or whatever, this is a great card. And Ghoulish Impetus enchants a creature, gives a +1/+1, and has Death Touch, and is goated. I love that ability. And when the creature dies, we return Ghoulish Impetus to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step, attaching it to another thing. That's super great. It's going to be able to keep us attaching stuff to creatures and protecting ourselves in the process. Gift of Immortality, Kaya's Ghost Form, and Luris of the Dream Den are next. Gift of Immortality is an enchantment that never dies. When an enchanted creature dies, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Return Gift of Immortality to the battlefield attached to that creature at the beginning of the next end step. If there's a really pesky creature we really don't want attacking us, definitely equip Gift of Immortality to it. But if there's a creature you want to steal, Kaya's Ghost Form is for you. We can enchant a creature or planeswalker, and then when that permanent dies or is put into exile, we return that card to the battlefield under our control. This is so cool. Being able to steal any of our opponent's stuff when it dies is sick, and I really love this card. And Lures to the Dream Den has lifelink, and during your turns, you may cast one permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. Enchantment auras are permanent spells, so we can cast our stuff from our graveyard, which I love. This is one of the most powerful cards, and is probably going to be a threat that's removed immediately after your opponents see how good it's going to be in this deck, so cast what you can while you can. Next up is Mantle of the Ancients. Minions returned. And Neva, Stalked by Nightmare. Mantle of Ancients returns any number of target aura or equipment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to an enchanted creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to it. Whether we play this on our opponent's creature and attach a huge amount of stuff to it to swing into our other opponents with, or we use it on our own, this is a killer card that can pretty much end the game very quickly. Minions Returned works similar to Kaya's Ghost Form, but it has Flash, which is super neat. When an enchanted creature dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control. And Neva, Stalked by Nightmares lets us return a target creature or enchantment from a graveyard to our hand, and whenever an enchantment control is put into a graveyard, we can put a +1/+1 on her and then scry, which I really like. We're obviously going to have a lot of enchantments dying as our opponents block our other opponent's stuff that's attacking them, but this is really great. Nomad Mythmaker, Retether, and Sun Titan are next. With Nomad Mythmaker, white tap, put a target or a card in a graveyard into play attached to a creature you control. I love this card because it works so well with our other stuff. Just like we were talking about Mantle of the Ancients, that's whenever it enters the battlefield. So I'm not sure exactly how this works, but I think it works exactly how I think it will, and we'll get all those enchantments back with. Retether is another get everything back card with return each aura card from your graveyard to play. Only creatures can be enchanted this way. This doesn't say our creature. So if we have a ton of auras in our graveyard, we can just attach them all to our opponent's stuff and not have to worry about them coming back at us. And lastly, one of my favorite creatures, Sun Titan. Whenever it enters battlefield or attack, you can return a permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. The average mana cost in this deck is under 3, so a majority of the cards in this deck are going to be able to be returned with Sun Titan for us to get some great value with. Moving into our last couple categories, I want to talk about removal, because we are definitely going to want to remove some stuff that maybe we can't enchant or is becoming too pesky with that enchant we have. So first off, we have Agent of Fates, Anguished Unmaking, and Generous Gift. Agent of Fates is a really unique card because it has whenever you cast a spell that targets Agent of Fate, each opponent sacks a creature. There aren't too many spells that when they target a creature they don't deal damage really we put in deck, but auras are definitely one of those, and we have an abundance of them. So if we just want our opponents to keep sacking stuff and make a giant creature in the process, we can do that. Anguished Unmaking is one of my favorite cards because it exiles a target non-land permanent, whether it's an enchantment or artifact that's hard to deal with. In Orzhov, this is definitely going to make it easy to remove. And same is true with Generous Gift. We can destroy a target permanent, and that controller creates a 3/3 elephant, which seems like a fair trade for some of the stuff we're going to get rid of. And next up we have Path to Exile, Stroke of Midnight, and Swords to Plowshares. Path to Exile exiles a creature. Stroke to Midnight destroys a non-land permanent, and their controller only makes a 1/1, which I like. And Swords to Plowshares also exiles a creature, and they gain life equal to its power. Talking about gaining life, though, our commander's second ability is actually going to be pretty important, because if we have 10 auras on the board, at our end step we're going to gain 10 life, and they're going to lose 10 life. So let's double that up. We have some aura and enchantments here that are really going to help us out with Light of Promise, Sanguine Bond, and Spirit Link. Light of Promise is going to make a creature super big with whenever we gain life, put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. This is going to routinely buff our board as long as our commander is on there, and this is going to be an awesome enchantment to have. Sanguine Bond is also great because whenever we gain life, our target opponent is going to lose that much life. So whenever we gain 10 life, let's say for 10 enchantments on the board, our opponents are going to lose another 10 life, losing 20 life in total, which is half of their life total very, very easily. And Spirit Link is super neat because it doesn't give a creature lifelink, but whenever enchanted creature deals damage, you gain that much life. Meaning we put that on our opponent's stuff and they don't get the benefit of lifelink because it said it's not lifelink. Very similarly, we have Vampiric Link and Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose as our next two cards, with Vampiric Link doing exactly the same thing. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage, you gain that much life. I really love this effect, and this is going to be super great if we're buffing up something really big and making them swing with it. We can get a ton of life in the process. And Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose has whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Just like Sanguine Bond, these are going to be epic cards that are just going to pretty much win us the game. And our last category here is search spells. No good aura enchantment deck would be complete without them. And we have Enlightened Tutor, Moonblessed Cleric, and Open the Armory. All of these are going to let us search for enchantments, auras, any of that stuff, put it on top, put it in our hand. I really, really love these cards. If we need something in a pinch, we're going to be able to get them with it, or maybe we want something specific. But that wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This was a super fun deck to build, and I'm probably going to actually build this one. I build a lot of these decks for my channel and think about building them, but it's just weird enough where you're not going to have seen it before, but it's going to be super powerful, and I can definitely expect to see a lot of these as this set releases, because right now it's selling for almost $20, which is incredible. Shows you just how strong this card is, and maybe it's going to make a name for itself in some more competitive formats or something. But I'm super hyped to get my hands on this card myself, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed. And today's Scryfall card of the day is Witch King, Bringer of Ruin. No living man may hinder me. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.